announce that we're live. Oh, I always forget. Discord doesn't turn things into links unless you add the HTTP to it. Which is like, why though? Why would you be this way? Okay. So I know Tree is already in chat. Hello, Tree. And we'll give everybody else a few minutes to pile on in. So everybody's staying sane, it sounds like, for the most part. For now.
Yeah, for the most part. It's different things, different days, maybe. Different locals.
Yeah. I mean, we can only be expected to stay so sane in these unprecedented times. Tree says, I'm never really sane, so it's not really different. Which, fair.
I'm trying to think of things that I've done since we last met. And I'm not sure. I think I turned 30.
Oh, congratulations.
Book club, so.
Welcome to the 3-0. I'm only ahead of you a little bit. I turned in February myself, so.
Everyone's saying that the 30s are the new 20s, so.
There is something to be said for that. Also, a lot of people were like 30. Wow, 30 is such a big difference. I don't feel all that different at 30 than I did at 29.
Yeah. I did not either. I still do not.
Hi, Breck. Tree says that is a magical decade where people listen to you so much better. That has also not been my experience.
I was going to say, that's not my experience.
My
I've experienced the most of this decade of the 3 on this call, and no, not my experience.
I get just as much guff from anybody who was giving me guff before as I did before I turned 30. So that there's been no change there. Been no change.
I only have about a month's worth of experience, so hard to say. And in that
Fair.
month, I've talked to maybe 3 people.
Fair. We did an extra life stream. Was that last weekend? No. It was the weekend
2 weekends ago, I think.
that sounds right. Oh. Lauren and Sharon are coming through very muted. Let me see. I have a suspicion.
Tell us when to make sounds, and we'll make more sounds.
I was a cool hip person and played Among Us recently with my D&D group.
Ah, how did you like that?
It was okay. I'm not a video gamer. I'm a tabletop person myself, but it was fun. It was kind of like a virtual, werewolf coup type betrayal game.
Yeah.
Josh and Gabe have been streaming that a couple of times.
Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't played it, but I see it all over the internet.
I never got to be the imposter though. So
I feel like that's where the most fun is, but there is something very enjoyable about like being Sherlock Holmes and being like, now if that were the case, then why were you leaving electrical?
Yeah, and I played with my D&D group, which I've not really been friends with outside of D&D because I met them through D&D. So it's like weird because they're not their characters, but like that's how I've interacted with them most. But now we're having to decide like who's betrayed who. It's fun.
You almost want to see like your D&D group do Among Us as their D&D characters.
Right?
That'd
Yeah,
be
it was weird. It was weird doing a non D&D thing with them, but fun.
I could see that. I can absolutely see that. I was gonna say we did Extra Life and we wanted to hit $1,250, which I think we're still $140 short of. So if anybody who's jumping on stream hasn't donated yet or would like to donate, we are still going to uphold final the final stretch goal where we do 3 games of Phasmophobia instead of 1 with a rotating cast of folks. I will drop that link in chat. Oh, Tree says, I think Among Us is a great stress reliever. I like sending people into the vacuum of space. I mean,
Oh,
ideally, we're not sending people into the vacuum of space. We are instead sending, like, murderous alien creatures into the vacuum of space. And then Tree also says, that day was a lot of fun. Thanks. You are very welcome. Super glad that we were able to be kind of a bright spot since things be cray.
That's what I was doing while I was building my shelf. Was I had the stream up all day long as I built a shelf.
Yeah.
I just listened to everyone playing games. So I built things very slowly.
I built a couple of IKEA nightstands a couple months ago, and I think the downstairs neighbors thought that I was hammering at them. It's always fun.
I needed a shelf to put all of my book club books on. So
A worthy cause.
this was getting a little overwhelmed. So
Fair.
we're back at sort of a stasis situation here, and we're growing in this direction now.
Yes, I like this plan. Hi, Marion. Marion says, I skipped this month's book, but I'm hanging out anyway for a bit, just because I was lazy. And you know what? Fair. Did you ever read The Princess Bride, Marion, or have you seen the film? Yeah, I think IKEA furniture assembly it's a worthy effort. It's something you feel good about once it's finished, especially if it's really solid when you're done. You're like, I put this together right. I'm a champion.
It always makes me feel like rugged and independent. And to put the bookshelves that I made together, I had to like hammer and nail it, which I never had to do with IKEA furniture before.
Oh wow.
And so I feel extra satisfied.
Mine was not IKEA furniture. It was like off-brand IKEA furniture, and it was all very. I wouldn't call it sturdy. It's structurally sound, but if I like whacked it, it would be like, oh, I'm weak. Don't. But it's holding together the way it should. It's nice. All those books.
It's one of those please don't hit me kinds of shelves. Please don't hit me.
It's up against the wall with the radiator, so it's kind of safe over there. It's out of danger zone.
Okay.
Have you ever had a shelf collapse? I had this like really crummy.
Yeah, but we're kind of getting a little bowed here.
Yeah.
It happened in the middle of the night, and in my room there was just a big crash as a whole like shelf on a bookshelf collapsed, and like all these books went everywhere.
Oh,
Very
no.
startling.
Oh no.
Thank you.
I've only had that once, and I wasn't present for it. It's one of those where I came home and the shelf had collapsed, and there was just stuff everywhere, which was a big oh no moment.
ransacked or something. Who did this?
Who was
Gravity.
rummaging? Who was rummaging through my many books looking for secrets?
It sounds like something a D&D party would be doing, honestly.
Yeah, pretty much. Marion says she read it in high school and has seen the film a million times. Tree says, just be careful who you build with. That can ruin marriages. Which, fair. Yes. Fair. Let's see. Marion says, but I don't remember anything about the book. Well, that's okay. The book, I was surprised actually to find the book follows the film pretty closely. Or vice versa.
If you like the movie and you remember the movie, the good news is you remember all of the best parts of the book too, because that part just follows along so nicely. I could see the movie in my head while I was reading.
Benefits.
Yeah, I was honestly really surprised at how closely and faithfully it followed the book.
I did a little bit of reading, and I think that's one of the benefits of having the screenwriter of the movie and the author of the book be the same person.
I didn't even think to check that.
Mm-hmm.
I also think that there are, before we started streaming, we were talking a little bit about the meta-ness of this book. I also think that some of the meta that is in the book is extra hammered into you in the book, and it was just one very simple, nice little layer to add on to the movie.
Right.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
Cut all that out and still make the same frame story happen.
Yeah.
Without this little extra thing that I think he threw in there for his own fun reasons that I'm not sure about.
Yeah.
So.
Brick says, I'm sure that will be a discussion point, but the movie is rather faithful to the book on the whole. Tree says, my chair broke and I fell into my bookcase and a shelf fell on me. Apocalypse.
That's too many things.
That's way too much going wrong all at once.
That means you get to give up for the day. You're done doing anything productive. You can do whatever you want.
If you had work later that day, you call in sick because that's what that means.
Yeah.
That's what that means. Fofacy, I just got here and what can ruin marriages? It's constructing IKEA furniture together, Fofacy. Sometimes it goes well, and sometimes people start yelling about how things are being done wrong. Breck. I didn't see Brecken's message, but Brecken said the same thing I did. I suppose that's not so surprising given that Goldman did both. Tree says, it reminded me of Taming of the Shrew with Kiss Me Kate as the play within a play. Many companies only do the interior play, but so much richer with both layers.
I am not sure that this would have been richer with an extra layer added onto the screenplay. I think it was a wise choice to leave it at just the one.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree. Marion says, I was probably thinking about the movie so much while I read it that it replaced any memory of the writing in my long-term storage banks. Fofacy says, also off topic, that cloud top is yes.
Thank you.
Tree says, some people read directions and some people don't. And then I think Peter Falk was a great layer, but more would have been too much meta. And then Marion says, I keep thinking about a story on Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me where the police were called on neighbors because someone thought a murder was happening and it turned out the couple was putting together a bookcase.
Yeah, so sad.
All right. We're 16 past. I think we're well within our rights to begin discussion of the book itself. So I suspect am going to have maybe the strongest negative opinion. So I would like someone else to take the lead if that's cool with y'all.
I can do my hot take unless Sharon, you want to take it away?
I think Lauren is probably going to be good middle ground here. I'm not arguing this is the best book ever, but I did get a little academically weird in there. So
Okay.
Okay, I'll do. So I didn't care for the book. I I liked the style and I liked the meta-ness. To disagree with you guys, I found it charming. So I liked the meta-ness. I liked the little parenthetical interludes. That and the friendship between Inigo and Fezzik were like my favorite parts. I thought in a lot of other ways it wasn't that interesting. My biggest complaint would be Buttercup and the absolute lack of any kind of three-dimensional female character slash the only things said about women are their looks, and also is like weirdly fat shamey about his son. That I was like, I was reading that, I was like, Jesus Christ, what? So yeah, I don't know, I wasn't a fan.
Yeah, so about the meta-ness, like I think it was a little too meta because it was confusing. Because I had to like look some of this stuff up and be like, wait, how much of this is actually like him as himself, the narrator, versus him, the character, the narrator himself? Like, I think based on what I looked up a couple of days ago, I think like that story of his son Jason and his wife Helen, they're fictional.
Yeah.
He was not married to a Helen, and Jason was not his son. So, like, he was writing this narrator that, like, I did not like. Like, I did not like the guy. There were, like, some moments where he was a little bit more, sympathetic, but not many. And then I think I did like the little parentheses parts in the actual like book itself, but I think that the stuff at the beginning and the stuff at the end just cluttered everything up a little bit too much, which I thought was really funny and probably purposeful if you think about it, because like he kept like those parentheses in the Princess Bride part of the book itself. He kept saying, oh, I'm taking this out because it's clearly him, Morgenstern, being a satirist and like making fun of all of the intricacies of the court. And it's like, okay, well, who's talking about the publishing industry and the film industry like so much and cluttering up the story? Like, can we get the good parts? Like, we agree. Yes, let's only read the good parts. So he was like he was out metaing himself all over the place. It's too much.
I think that's like the point though. Like the story,
yeah. I mean, it is the point, but it was a frustrating point.
I think I guess if you don't like it, then you don't like it. I think like the real story wasn't so much like Buttercup and Wesley and sword fights. It was more about him growing up, and so his relation to his father and the book, and then coming back to it, and his son, and writing this, and how we create like how we like look back on childhood with like false understanding and all sorts of like stuff about like growing up and nostalgia and stuff like that. That was the real like story, I think.
I'm curious, did anybody in chat read like the Buttercup's baby part of things? Because I read the whole thing, but I read it kind of out of order because I was trying to find like, okay, well, where does the book start? And so I started at The Princess Bride, and then I was like, okay, this is really a lot and it's a little crazy. And then I read all the way through the end, like through the Buttercup's baby stuff, and then I went and I read the introductions for like the 30th and then the 25th anniversary editions, which added some interesting information to the meta-ness. Like, Lauren, there's some nice Inigo Fezzik stuff in the Buttercup's baby part.
I didn't read that part.
Yeah, there's some nice stuff in there. It goes into like what immediately happens after the Princess Bride.
Mhm.
So you get to kind of go along on that little journey, which was kind of enjoyable. I was also afraid to read it, and as I was reading it, I was like, oh no, like I like the Princess Bride and I like how it ends. Is this gonna like ruin it for me? But ultimately it kind of just does sort of the same thing where you're like, okay, everyone is probably going to go live a happy life, and there are a couple of more little happy things that I can think about where, okay, maybe they're going to go do nice happy things. Okay.
So, real quick, I'm gonna jump into chat because chat is breezing. Glocken says, "I feel like Buttercup was intended to be two-dimensional as a princess parody, but even through parody, it still got tiring." Tree says, "I found those layers just so much fun. However, I love mysteries, so that may be my character flaw." I don't think that's a character flaw. Breckgood says, "I knew Morgenstern didn't exist, but I definitely was a little lost in the meta-ness at moments." Lost Limey says, "I said before that the book is even more fairy tale than the movie, including the lack of interiority to the Princess Bride character, for better or worse." Tree says, "Yes, very archetypical." Glocken says, "I skipped ahead of parts of the intros because they just got boring, satirical, sure, but boring satire." Um, Lost Limey says, "I felt that about the Buttercup's baby epilogue, which is only in most editions of the book." Tree says, "Have any of you read Moby Dick? He made a reference to it, and it has so many digressions. It seemed like he was in that track." I did Buttercup's baby and 25th intro and 30th intro. Breck says there was a snarky aside about how anyone but the most dedicated whalers could skim a lot of Moby Dick. Yeah. Lost Limey says, "I felt the idea of Buttercup's baby is that it's the unedited Morgenstern before Goldman trimmed it to the good parts version." Um, so I I got really frustrated with the intros to the book to the point where I read the 30th edition intro and then I was like halfway through the 25th edition and I was like, I need book and I need it now. Which was upsetting for me a little bit because I really like author asides, like Terry Pratchett's winking asides that he constantly does. I'm like, these are great. I love these. I think part of the problem that I had, and maybe this is a, hold on, I pulled up the date just so I wouldn't get it wrong. Maybe this is a 1973 problem. Um, but the way Goldman writes his narrator voice sounds like every Jewish stereotype I've ever heard in television or film, almost offensively so. And I was like, please, 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 please tell me this is who he is as a person and that maybe he's like playing it up a little bit for yucks as opposed to like some white guy being like, Jewish people, am I right? And it turns out, yes, he is in fact Jewish, born and raised in the US. So that is just, I think it's him like really leaning into that for humor, but it's like the tone of the narrator's voice. I'm like, oh, here we go again.
Yeah, I had a hard time getting behind the narrator for a lot of things. Like,
I'm really fascinated to find that like we're so divided on the narrator voice versus the book itself because like I do agree Buttercup is way too one-dimensional as a character. In fact, most of the characters are pretty one-dimensional.
They are,
hmm.
but not in an enjoyable way.
Yeah.
And
I liked a little bit of there was a little bit more to Buttercup than you get to see in like the movie, like talking about her growing up on the farm and like the fact that she always smelled like a horse because her favorite thing to do was to ride her horse and like that was her thing. Um, uh, but I think maybe the whole like, oh, it's a classic tale, like all of them being super one dimensional is like really purposeful as a choice. Like this is a classic fairy tale. This is the princess. This
like
daddy guy. This is the giant.
but like with like Fezzik and Inigo and Wesley, they all like grow and acquire skills and have backstory and like struggle, even when they're like kind of stupid or have character flaws or are incapable of like acting without direct direction or something. Like they have a story, right? Like you get a whole chapter on like Fezzik like growing up with his Turkish family and always being perceived one way and feeling a different way, and how that like shaped who he is. And then you have the main character, Buttercup. Most of her introduction is talking about hot women through history. And then when she, like, even when, like, you do get her growing up, it's mostly just like, other people think she's beautiful. Here's how she changed in the ranking of beautiful people. Oh, yes, she rode horses, but she didn't have an emotional connection to the horse. She didn't use that skill in any way or take like pride in it. It's just a thing she did until she decided she loved Wesley. I don't think it's quite the same.
Yeah, I think the most interesting part of like Buttercup's character growth or like development is just like within a couple of pages of each other, and it's when Wesley dies in the shipwreck, and she like does this like growing up sort of thing where she's just like, oh, okay, well, all right, I guess that's it for me and love, and I'm done with that. It was like worded very interestingly. Trying to see if I can find it. I think that was the only like growth area, and I'm not even sure it would count as growth. It was more of like it was like the most, it was watching Buttercup have to struggle with something on her own kind of thing. And so that was interesting. You don't really get as much of the like in her head space in the movie than you did in the book.
Yeah, I did like the stuff in the book, like giving us the info dump on the history of Fezzik and the info dump on the history of Inigo and kind of like where they came from and who they were before they started running with Vizzini, and kind of like how Inigo becomes this like layup out drunkard who is also somehow like one of the world's greatest fencers of all time. Like how do you get to these two places simultaneously? And it makes a lot of sense when they present it all out. And I understand like the film, with a limited budget and a limited amount of time that they could run on screen, the film wasn't going to be able to explore all of that. So I did really enjoy those looks, and kind of the expansion on like Prince Humperdinck and how he's kind of a malevolent and cruel character even before you start seeing the sort of villainy that he performs. Like they're talking about him being one of the world's greatest hunters, and that's their thing, and that's all he does.
I thought it was a really interesting choice as a villain. I kind of liked him as a villain. Um, I think like sport hunting is like a very good villainous activity. To bring my own personal whatever into it, but like that makes for a good villain. Like everybody can kind of agree that like, yeah, that's not great, and like I thought he was a pretty okay villain. He was a caricature, but like you still kind of hated him.
I mean, he was, at the end of the day, he was very Snidely Whiplash, where it was like, we hate you, but we love to hate you.
Yeah. I really liked the was it the Zoo of Death?
Zoo of Death, yes.
Yeah, the scenes where Inigo and Fez are going through the different levels of the Zoo of Death was a fun one, I thought.
So, real talk, I still didn't finish this month's book. That is right before they start trudging through the Zoo of Death, is the point in the book that I managed to get to this time. The problem I had this time was not a matter, I mean, this past month and a half has been both very stressful and very busy for me. So that is part of it. But the other part of it is that I tried to read the entire prologue like 5 times. And I picked up the book. I would get like 3 pages in, and I'd be like, I cannot with this right now, and I will put you down.
I think I can't remember if I skipped the anniversary introduction editions. I often skip authors' introductions because they contain spoilers a lot of the time, and that's happened to me before. So I tend to skip any kind of intro to like a classic book because everybody like assumes that you like, you know.
They talk about going to the museum in Florence City.
No, I did not read that.
Yeah, you might just as a museum studies person find that very interesting.
I assume it's in my copy.
It was.
Yeah.
So like even these like introductions they're not even real introductions. You know, they're meta introductions because there is no museum in Florence City. You can't see a cast of the real Fezzik's hand, but like that's what they say is in the museum in Florence City, and he goes there with his grandson and looks at it. So, you know, he sees Inigo's actual, you know, 6-fingered sword. Like,
well, and he talks about like Andre the Giant going to the museum and being like, holy smokes, like Fezzik's hand even dwarfs my own, and I'm a big guy.
He drags everybody else into the meta with him.
Right. The crazy thing about that is, as someone who is a bit of a like movie nerd for fun facts, I know for a fact that Andre the Giant spoke 0 words of English. And so the description that he has of Andre, you know, speaking kind of slowly and with a very thick French accent, it's like, no, he didn't. No, he didn't. Because he didn't learn any English to be able to do this movie. He literally parroted all of his lines, which is why they sound kind of funky, is because he's not learning the words and then saying them. He's literally just like, someone tells him what to say, and he has tapes for what to say. And then he gets on.
It says they have tapes with inflections included.
I think that part is
Anybody
actually
got
true.
a peanut? Like that.
Yeah. Which is really cool. Really cool.
Everybody has made up character versions of themselves in the book too.
Oh my gosh.
Circle. I feel like the meme with the yarn.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite memes, by the way.
It's great. And like, I feel like I'm being down on the meta and stuff. I think I probably enjoyed this book the most of the 3 of us, but it was confusing to me for multiple reasons, and some of it is for historical accuracy's sake. I want to know what actually is the situation here, and the situation is he made a bunch of stuff up, but did he make a bunch of stuff up all at once? Or did he make a bunch of stuff up at one point and then he made up a bunch more stuff and added it on, and then he made up a bunch more stuff on later and added that? Like, what is the actual order of events?
The more you're wondering, the more his art wins.
This is true.
I'm just giving him exactly what he wants.
Yeah.
Yes. This is exactly the case. I think the way it reads, I suspect that every time he came out with an anniversary edition and wrote another prologue and things like that, he added a little more meta to the book at large.
And he must have added some after the movie was made, because this was written like a decade before the movie, at least, right?
Yeah.
The movie came out in the 80s.
The thing that's wild to me is that the meta runs so deep. I was checking the inside cover because I was like, wait, when was this published? And then I was like, no, that is also a lie.
Yeah.
Looking inside the front cover, where you would normally see like publication dates and things like that, it
Mm-hmm.
says published 2007 for my edition, but just
Mm-hmm.
above that, it says the Library of Congress has cataloged the hardcover edition as follows: Goldman, William, 1931. Oh, that's his birthday. Never mind. I confused myself is what just happened. He was born 1931.
98, 2003. Map and Reader's Guide copyright 2007.
Yeah.
It's interesting that it's sort of a like not quite a living document, but like more so than any book I can think of.
Certainly than most books.
Outside of like
in
like
the 50th
nonfiction.
edition, it will include a CD or like a little chip or something on which our stream is embedded.
Ooh, I like the sound of that. I did enjoy that there was one of the asides was he was talking about the like what Buttercup and Wesley say to each other. And he's like, I'm not going to put you all through all of that. But if you really want to read it, you can write my publisher and they will send you the thing. And then he comes back, I'm assuming for the 30th edition, and goes, we have a website now. You could just go to the website and look at the thing.
And then later on, he's like, but there's a lawsuit and all this other stuff. So actually, no, you still can't have it. Sorry.
Yeah, there's like made up lawsuits for like
what?
Yeah, it's in the afterword. You don't actually get those scenes because he's like, there's lawsuits and I can't.
See, satire on publishing and filmmaking industry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think Glocken just said this as well. He was saying that, full disclosure, I wasn't in a good frame of mind for whatever the book was going to be this month. And I think, in full honesty with myself, I probably wouldn't have gotten quite so crotchety with like the asides and things if I was in a like more positive and upbeat frame of mind as well. Like, I think I only got so grumpy because it was like, I don't have time or patience for any of this. Ah.
Yeah, I think I just wanted to have like an idea of what was supposed to be happening, and instead it was making my brain do too much. I was just hamster wheeling, and I couldn't get to where I wanted to be in order to enjoy it the whole time. So there were like nice little brief snatches where I'm like, okay, we're in the story now. Here's Inigo. We're learning about Inigo growing up. This is adorable. Okay. And then it would come to a screeching halt, and I'd be like, wait, what? What are we talking about now?
I think
so interesting. I was the opposite. I was like, I liked the like editorial bits about how he chose to put in and take out things, and I found the actual story of the Princess Bride like pretty boring. And so there, I'd just be like, oh, I gotta like this chapter of, you know, whatever Buttercup and Prince Humperdinck arguing about something. I don't really care. Okay, let's like read it, but like I'm not like that happy about it because it's all so like flat and straightforward. I don't know. I don't think I appreciated the classic like princess fairy tale allegory. It wasn't a deconstruction because I didn't feel like it really engaged with the tropes that well. I don't know, like, would you consider this is certainly like meta, like a piece of like meta storytelling, story within a story, It's certainly got some stuff to say, critique of like the publishing industry. But like, would you consider it like a satire of like classic fairy tales? Would you consider it like a deconstruction, an homage?
I mean, I think maybe part of the reason why we're having trouble classifying it is because it's not really specifically one of those camps. Like, it's kind of an homage and kind of satirical at the same time. Because
yeah, I'm having a hard time.
He plays it too honest for it to be a true like satire or deconstruction. You know, this
It
isn't
feels too pure.
this isn't the Stinky Cheese Man and other grim tales or whatever that book is called, where it's like fairy tales are weird, and this book is also weird as a like demonstration of how weird fairy tales are, and you accept the logic in those just because they're fairy tales. So you should just as easily accept the logic in this, except it's gross and you won't.
Yeah, I think this will be really particularly interesting in contrast to Terry Pratchett's work, which is solidly in the like satirical humor of like classic fantasy stories. Whereas like this is not quite that, but like not that. And both authors use asides and some meta humor. I think Terry Pratchett is a fan of like footnotes, if I
He
recall.
is. And his footnotes, I was actually just having this conversation with Alon before jumping onto this call for book club. The thing I think I ended up being grumpy about with Goldman's footnotes that I seem to appreciate about Pratchett's footnotes is that Pratchett's footnotes are purely optional. They're essentially jokes that he felt like making, but he knew we're going to take like an additional 2 or 3 or 4 lines of text for him to tell. And so instead of putting them in and arguing with his editor about whether or not they could or even should be there, he was like, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to put a footnote and I'm going to drop the joke down to the bottom of the page. And if somebody wants to read it, great. They can join me at the bottom of the page for the joke I wanted to tell. And then they can go back to reading the book. If they don't want to read it, they can skip right over it and they're not missing anything.
All the stuff that you just said, Goldman actually puts into the text of his footnotes.
Right.
Essentially. Like, I'm going to include a footnote, but I argued with my publisher and my editor about it, and here's why. And there's a whole story about how I had to call them up, and they went to a store. And anyways, here's the footnote. Here's why I included it. And here's relevant. And now 3 pages later, back to the story.
There was a point that I actually yelled at the book because I got into the chapter where Vizzini has been bested, and we're going back to see like Inigo waking up, Fezzik waking up, and kind of their adventure from there forward. We get a page-long aside about Inigo and being like, no one wants to hear about, you know, the follies of youth and growing old and being incapable of pure and true competition any longer. And then he starts talking about Robert Browning's book of poems not selling any copies. And I'm like, all right, Bill. All right, Bill. I see where you're going with this. Okay, we're back in the story. We get 1.5 pages of story, and then we're into another aside. And I like slapped the book closed, put it on the table, and I was like, no, bad book. No, this is not how you do me.
We're just living out what his fictional narrator character is doing.
Yes.
It's a trap. The whole thing is a trap.
Oh my gosh. So Lost Limey says Pratchett's such a fan of footnotes that Footnote is a character in a couple of the stage adaptations. Glocken says, I think Pratchett is more steadily in a certain space, combining satire and a fantasy story. Goldman kind of bounced between extremes rather than treading a middle path. Breckett says Goldman had done Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid by the time he wrote this book. I don't think editors could tell him no anymore. And then Tree catches us up with, yes, Robert Browning digression was awesome. Yeah, I feel like editors can always tell you no. I don't think anybody gets so big that their editor's like, oh my gosh, I don't. Well, they're a genius though, because most of the time when you're that big, your editor got there with you. Like you probably haven't changed editors at the very least not that many times, and so your editor is looking at all of this stuff with you and going, bad, but no.
I don't know
No.
enough about how it works, but you know, I mean, this was clearly a success. So like, they did a good job, though. Like, it's a very successful book and movie. It's counted. I remember I shared, I think, like maybe a month ago, the it was like 100 or something like influential like sci-fi and fantasy books, and this was on the list for what it's worth.
Yeah.
You know,
I mean, that's the thing. That is one thing I probably need to keep in mind anytime I'm thinking about this book is that this was 1973 that he originally wrote it. That is
I really want to get my hands on a 73 book copy. I want to compare so bad.
that is a
do you feel like it was written in the 70s? Because it didn't really feel like, other than like the, I guess, weird sexism, it didn't really feel like it was written in the 70s. The tone felt fairly modern. I don't know.
I mean,
All
that's
that like ringing New York and having someone run down to a store and all that stuff, that felt kind of 70s to me.
Yeah, I guess.
I think
But
more the point I was trying to make was that this would be a book that was so influential on other books. This may even be something that inspired Terry Pratchett to write the way he does. Because I don't know when Terry Pratchett started publishing. I was actually just about to look that up. Because I
I have
know
no
his
idea.
first book was Color of Magic, but I don't know when that first got published. Um, 1983. So, Pratchett very easily could have read The Princess Bride and been like, I I like the cut of this man's jib. I think I can do this sort of thing too, maybe even better. So, like 73, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that hadn't been established yet as tropes at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And as I am sitting here being like, about the asides, I have to understand that this book predates a lot of the media I'm really fond of and may, in fact, be a progenitor for a lot of the media I'm fond of that is more tongue in cheek, that is more facetious.
Like the mockumentary, the Office style. It's like pretending to be like a real factual thing when in fact everything is a fiction, and like we're so saturated with like that kind of meta ness, I
Right,
think, in media.
right. Where when this was released, this was probably not only highly influential, but something really different
Mm.
as compared to, I don't know, like Tolkien or, I know there were other fantasy writers, but can't I can't think of a lot of books that I've read that would be from that time period. When was the Myth series written? Does anybody in chat know when the Myth series was written? I feel like pulling up Chrome is distracting me from the conversation too much.
I'm trying to think, like, when was Ursula K. Le Guin, like, Wizard of Earthsea? Like, 70s? I'm more, like, when I think of, like, the 50s to the 70s, I tend to think of sci-fi. I don't tend to think of fantasy, so.
Fair.
Not sure.
Well, not least of which, like, sci-fi goes way back, um, like further than I would have anticipated. Certainly,
I
chats.
think the first description of uh, what we might recognize as a like robot is in the Iliad.
I think you're
Um,
right.
Hephaestus makes metal automated people to work in his workshop.
Apparently, Earthsea was 68,
There we go.
which is pretty impressive. So yeah, like I had not thought about the fact that this book came out in 73. I tend to try to be a little bit easier on things that would have been not only products of their time, but also influencers for things to follow. Um, I have perhaps been a little bit too harsh on this book because I quite honestly thought that it was a product of the mid 80s or early 90s, about the time that the film came out.
Yeah. It's interesting how saturated my like imagination of like my experience of this book was for like imagery from the movie. Maybe because it's so faithful, maybe because the movie is so iconic, or maybe because the writing of the fantasy world is so bare bones. Um, it was so difficult for me to separate like the book from the movie in a way that like I don't tend to read a lot of books that get turned into movies. So maybe it's just not come up that often for me, but it was like it was the same. Like that's exactly what I imagined when I read the book. I was like, how about for you guys? I don't know.
It just follows so closely. I mean, the way that the screenplay was done. The only things that like my imagination got to like churn around on were the things that weren't included in the screenplay version, like Inigo growing up and Fezzik growing up. Like those are the only things that I was like, oh, I'm inserting my own like mental pictures here for what's going on there. Everything else, it just seemed to follow along exactly with like the script of the movie. So I was just like, oh, and here's what that looks like. I already know.
I mean, I think part of the problem that you run into there is that the movie was so well done and is such a classic. I feel like we discussed this last book club, but pretty much the only thing that doesn't really hold up for the movie from then to now is To the Pain, which, when you really think about To the Pain, is a distinctly ableist look at the world.
Hmm.
Um, but everything else holds up shockingly well, given that the movie came out, what now? We're closing on 30 years ago? Like, the 90s are the product, have lots of things that are very problematic that we consider like classics. Uh,
Yeah.
it just, there's a lot of things that it's like you go back and you watch them and you're like, oh, I forgot about how problematic all of this is.
Yeah.
But Princess Bride, I think the only thing that they're like, well, this is really like culturally upsetting is To the Pain. And that's like, uh, Breckett points out that the only pause I had in that regard is the book Humperdinck's description did not match the actor, which is fine, of course. Yeah, I kind of felt the same way. Clearly, in the writing of the book, Goldman was picturing someone significantly stockier, but I think the actor did such a good job being Humperdinck that I'm willing to accept the retcon on what he looks like, because you don't need to be a super stocky person to be really good at hunting. So
I was just poking around on the internet, and the internet says that the Princess Bride interior story itself was a story that he made up for his two daughters, his actual for real daughters in his real life. One who requested a story about princesses and one who requested a story about brides or a bride. And so the names Buttercup and Humperdinck are like left over from those original stories because he just picked goofy names for like a kid's fairy tale. So that's an interesting little nugget.
That's interesting that it was based on something created to be told to a child, and in the book, it was told to a child and then like remembered later. I don't know, that's interesting.
I mean, I will say like that is something that was kind of nice about that meta aspect was that it definitely feels like the sort of like a remembered through childhood sort of experience. Like it's very honest in that kind of assessment of the story because it feels like what he's presenting it as.
Yeah, I think I don't know, like the way he talks about experiencing and loving this story, I think sort of informs the way in which you engage with it. And then also, like, I think it's very easy as a reader to like recall your childhood favorite stories. And I don't know, I thought it was interesting.
Yeah. I think I think the thing I should clarify is that I don't dislike all of the asides. I just feel like there's too many of them.
Mm-hmm.
Like they break up the book a lot.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Too long.
I definitely don't want them all stacked together because that's basically what the prologue and the prologue are, and I wasn't a fan of that either. So I don't know if it's one of those situations where it's just the writing style and he goes on in that fashion a little longer than I would like, or if it's just that I was not in the right headspace for that kind of material, and that being the case, I was like, ah.
No, I think it was too long. I I think I think most books are too long, and it's not that I don't like to read or don't want to read lots of books. It's just I think I don't know if you've heard of. There's a TikTok trend because I'm wildly addicted to TikTok. No nuance November, where you're supposed to give your hot takes, and I think my hot take would be most books can be 50 to 100 pages shorter, and it would make them better. And I think this could have used 50 less pages.
I don't know if there's any editors watching right now, but I'm sure if they were, they'd be like, "Yes, Lauren. Yes. Thank you."
I think, yeah. Same with movies, to be honest. 30 minutes shorter, just across the board. Cut it.
There are so the thing I will say is that it is fairly rare in films that there's not like one or two scenes that I'm like, I could have stayed on the cutting room floor.
Mm-hmm.
We did it didn't give us anything. We didn't need it. But there are films that do manage their like what 2.5 hours or whatever, where it's like there's no way. There's no way you're using all of that information, and then they do, and it's like, because
Yeah.
you do need like some quiet spaces, whether it's a book or a movie or anything like that. Like um, I feel like Six of Crows was
Mm-hmm.
really well paced.
Yeah.
Um, I do though. There are sections where it's kind of like, what are we doing right now? What are we exploring? What's what's the drive? What keeps me motivated to continue reading this section?
I think Six of Crows is very well paced, and I think part of that is that the series was a duology. They just cut out that whole middle book.
And it follows the different points of view, so like you're not like following one person to like distraction of just being like, this is too much, like you could cut some of this and we'd still know what's going on, but like you're hopping from person to person, so each person's point of view section is shorter than like if the whole book was all from one person's point of view.
Yeah. The multiple point of view thing is something I've thought about recently, just as a general reader, and like when it's successful and when it's not. I don't know if I should get it. I struggle with them. I thought Six of Crows did multiple point of views really, really well. Not only was it part of the storytelling, like and important to like keeping part of the mystery very sneakily, but also it helped drive the plot and inform the other characters. And I just read a book where it had lots of multiple point of views, but the characters aren't interacting. They're like scattered, kind of like Game of Thrones style. I found it just so tedious. I like the like
it's easier when they're related to each other some way, so you can just be like, oh, okay, I'm just yeah.
Well, you want if you're going to be doing lots of POVs, in my opinion. Obviously, we're all speaking with our own opinion voices here. I think it needs to be more like a heist film, where it's like you're not like, okay, we're preparing to, like here's the driver preparing the getaway vehicle, and then we're going to snap to across the country where someone else is figuring out how to stash counterfeit bills, and they're completely unrelated until the final sequence. That's frustrating because it's like, what does any of this mean? Where
like right when you get invested in that person and like the point of view that you're reading, you're like, okay, I got to know what happens next. Oh, you won't find out for 20 pages because we're going to switch POVs.
Right. Like I would much rather have that heist transition. It sounds like Lost Limey and Glock gonna have to jump off. Take care, y'all. Thanks for joining us. That most heist movies, the way they handle that is they will have a character doing something, and then it will soft transition from them like interacting with another character to then what that character is doing, so that you're kind of bouncing from place to place. And I think Six of Crows did that exceptionally well, in part because it was built to be a heist book.
Yeah.
Yeah, you sort of see like the beginnings of everyone putting their little piece of the plot together, and then you see the thing happen, and then you find out how all of this earlier stuff happens on the other end of the big thing.
Yeah. I only just realized that Sharon's video is frozen, and I don't know how long that's been the case.
It's been a little while.
Okay. Did you tab out Sharon from the Zoom call?
I don't think so. I don't know.
So strange.
I hope it's not frozen on something real dumb, but
well, it's like you holding your chin with a contemplative look on your face.
Yeah, it's maybe like a little bit judgy, or like
okay.
One of the two.
But your audio is coming through fine, so Marion says it's been frozen for about 10 minutes. Oh my gosh. Apparently my powers of observation are not very strong.
Oh no. Everybody's moving around on my Zoom call. I don't know what's up.
It's so strange. I don't know. Alon says, as far as like you could cut out 100 pages or so, 50 to 100 pages, says same with albums, like music.
Interesting.
I think that's a fair take. There's usually one or two songs bare minimum in a given album that didn't need to be in that album. On average, I would say. There are definitely albums where I'm like, leave it all in. It's all beautiful. I love all of it. Just like there are books that are like that. Tree says, I respectfully
50 pages, I feel confident saying can be cut out of a lot of books.
Yeah. Tree says, I respectfully disagree on shortening books. I think you need to learn what you like to read and how to recognize that so your expectations are met. I think it's less that all books need shortening and more that those books don't need the 50 to 100 pages of stuff. Like they could be shortened and not lose anything. Um Lost Limeade cracks the joke. Dr. Seuss would be inconsolable if his books were all 100 pages shorter.
Oh.
Yeah. I think when it comes to, like, especially in fantasy books, like world building and mood setting, it can be done like more effectively and with more nuance in like better ways than just I'm going to describe something for 5 pages.
Yeah.
Um,
I have noticed
or like
that
here is a flashback of a character doing something. Instead, it can be like woven into the story in like more clever ways, I think.
I have noticed that describing things for pages and pages on end seems to be a classic literature thing. One of the greatest foibles of my reading history is I was always really into like knights and dragon kind of stories, and I did a little research and I found out that Ivanhoe is like the first in the line to really knock that whole like chart of style over and like really establish itself. And so I was like, oh, well, I should read that then because that's precisely the sort of thing that I need to get into because like I want to see like what are the roots? Where did it come from? And I started reading and it was literally like 15 or 20 pages describing 4 people riding horses. And I was like, who has time for this? I don't have time for this. Also, why do I care what's in these people's pockets? I don't know them yet. For all I know, they die in 3 seconds.
Yeah, I'm sitting across from my bookshelf and I'm looking at my Wheel of Time books. I've read 4, and each one of those could have lost 50 pages easy. There's a lot of traveling, a lot of just BS.
I think it's the literature narrative equivalent of B reel footage, where you kind of oh my gosh, the mod is so strict. It tried to Tree posted Ivanhoe is credited with ruining the southern states and creating the idea of the southern gentleman that was so toxic. Um, and it tried to mod her comment because it had Ivanhoe in it. And I'm like, moderator, no. Ivanhoe is allowed. Um, Breckett says, "Oh boy, wait until you hit the middle of the wheel of time." Ha
It's not happening.
ha.
Ain't gonna happen.
Lauren's gonna drop the middle several pages of books of the Wheel of Time. Just the whole book. Just pick up the book and be like, we don't need that one.
If all right, to appease people, I will recommend a very long book with dragons that I really, really genuinely enjoyed. Priory of the Orange Tree. It's like 800 pages.
Whoa.
It's a standalone fantasy, so I forgive it because in most fantasy, you get a trilogy. This is all in one.
Right.
If you like lots of dragons, talking good dragons, bad dragons, Western dragons, Eastern dragons. If you like lesbians, they're in there. If you like sort of some non-Western fantasy, really good.
You you
Frozen.
you said Priory of the Orange Tree?
It's
I'm
too
And
long
I
to
still
do for a book
Frozen.
club, and it starts kind of slow, but it's really fun.
I'm just gonna save that to my desktop just as a note for me for later.
You probably can't see me because I guess I'm still frozen, but I'm waving the book in front of my webcam.
No, you're
It's
you're
on
still
my
frozen,
reach shelf.
looking studious and perhaps a little bit like critical.
It's like this. It's a tome.
Oh my gosh.
I remember I took it hiking with me because I was gonna like set up my hammock and read for a couple hours, like on the trail, and I felt it in my backpack.
Yeah, I was about to say this is heavy. This is a chunky book. Also,
Yeah.
the margins are like almost a full inch. They're like 3/4 of an inch. They're huge. So like there's a lot of blank space in here.
Yeah.
Let's see. Breckett says there is at least one entire book in the middle of Wheel of Time that didn't need to exist. No joke. Which is a little sad, I will be honest. Um, Tree asks, Dragon Book, have you tried The Fire Within by Chris DeLacy? That sounds vaguely familiar. I'm going to have to look and see if that's one that I've read or not. Because I honestly
Haven't,
am not sure.
but I like dragons.
And Sharon, Tree dropped a screenshot of the freeze into the Discord so that you can see how fabulous you look.
I don't want to look. I'm so sad.
I mean, you don't look sad
Really
to me.
felt
Holy
like
smokes.
you guys needed to see.
Though
Very pretty though.
you are correct.
Thick.
If that's going to be the only book, it being 800 pages is okay. Because it's the equivalent of having like 3 books probably that are each 200 and change pages. Or like 300. So like, that's doable, I think. Where
Yeah, I think it's one of the reasons I both like novellas a lot, and duologies are a really good format because I don't know, like the best part of trilogies are like the beginning where you meet all the characters and you find out the story and the quest and you get going, and then the end where like you get all the like action and conclusion and the final boss battle and all of that stuff, and then the middle is just like character growth, whatever, struggle, travel.
I still haven't picked up and opened my copy of Harrow the Ninth, but I am intrigued to hear what everybody who has been reading their copy of Harrow the Ninth thinks, since isn't that the middle of a trilogy?
It is, and it's really weird. So I'd be interested to see what people say if anybody's read it.
I'm only like maybe a chapter or 2 into Harrow, and so far can concur. Weird. I think I've kind of got an idea of what it was that I felt like I was missing at first. I'm starting those pieces, but I did feel a little slow at first.
Interesting.
Yeah, I don't know how much to say, but it's a little bit more abstract than like Gideon, and maybe a little bit harder to like get into, I think. But it's still really good.
I mean, that kind of makes sense, if only from the stance of you get introduced to the world that Gideon lives in through the eyes of Gideon, who is a self-proclaimed meathead. So like, for things to be a little bit more strange and abstract, I think makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, you follow Harrow, and she is gonna overthink everything, and like
she's just a little edgelord.
She is. She's very sad. Very sad edgelord.
Tree says sometimes carpal tunnel encourages trilogies rather than giant one shots, and okay, fair. fair.
Yeah.
Lifting
I think.
lifting
Go
and
ahead,
reading
sorry.
through an 800-page book does sound like an active effort. Oh, now
Yeah.
Sharon's video is gone altogether.
Yep. Am I back?
Wait,
No, not quite.
not quite.
Oh god.
Hold on.
Well,
I'm gonna.
I'm gonna leave this call and goodbye,
Okay.
everyone.
We'll
If I don't see you again, have a nice book club. I'll be trapped on the other side of the internet. Farewell.
we'll see you in a moment, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um I'm really intrigued to get into Harrow the Ninth because I enjoyed Gideon the Ninth, but there were points where I was like, Gideon is such a meathead, and there are questions that I have about the like way things work. Someone's engine is very loud. I had questions about the way things work that just were not getting answered by Gideon. Hey, Sharon's not only back,
I'm in
uh,
here twice, apparently.
but you're here twice now. Well, the nice thing is, I'm just going to drag that. Wait, there we go. I'm just going to move that version of you into that corner. And
I don't
now.
know how that version of me even exists.
Oh, and it's gone.
Perfect.
I'm
Spooky.
gonna blame my work computer.
Fair. Fair. But there were so many times where I was like, I have questions, and Gideon is never going to ask those questions because that's not who Gideon is.
Get ready to have more questions.
Oh no.
Oof.
So I'm a little bit curious since next month's book is Guards. What's everyone's familiarity with Terry Pratchett? Because he's written, I don't know, a million books. I've read maybe 3, 4 if you count Good Omens. So I'm kind of a Terry Pratchett newbie. What about you guys / the chat?
I'm like a couple books behind you, Lauren. Like also like have flirted with some Terry Pratchett books in the past, like read Good Omens, but haven't done a deep dive.
I have read 90% of the Discworld catalog.
How many books do you think that is?
30?
30?
Yeah. I think kind of in that kind of area. I have read pretty much everything he's released that was Discworld based. I did read Good Omens as well, loved it. I started reading his young adult witchy novel, but I actually didn't get to finish that one because it was a shared copy with someone who is now an ex. So that stayed with her when things did not go so well, and I haven't picked it up again, in part because of, reminders of less than great times.
Right. That's We Free Men, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Tree
If you want
says
a little fun. Oh,
Tree says
go
she's
ahead.
read about 2/3 of Discworld and is trying to put off getting to the end. One nice thing about Discworld is the characters then proceed to make cameos in later books, and I love that part, like old friends showing up, which
Oh, yeah.
fully agreed. It's so wonderful, especially when it's one of the like characters that's usually a main character in some of their own books, and they just like appear briefly and then like vanish into the fog. Brackett's experience with Pratchett is that he tried to get into Discworld years ago with the Color of Magic and didn't manage it. Read Good Omens a while back and loved it, and now for book club has read Guards and absolutely loved it.
Awesome. I read Color of Magic a long time ago because I was like, I heard this Discworld thing is good. Let me start with the first one. And I read Color of Magic. I read Going Postal, which I really enjoyed. And then I think I might have read another one about time.
Oh yeah, the Night Watch maybe.
Maybe. And then I bought Guards a long time ago and I just never read it.
So the thing I will say about Terry Pratchett is that the temptation to read The Color of Magic, because it's the first book in the series, so I should read the first book first. It's a strong temptation, but it is far, 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 far from Terry Pratchett's best work. And it's just not. It is not a strong declaration of what Discworld is all about. I think Guards is a significantly better introductory book. Um, but Tree is talking about her first Discworld was Going Postal and was very much about the building of the internet. And since they used to work at AOL in the 90s, it was just like the perfect one to start with.
Nice. I really liked Going Postal.
Going Postal was fantastic. I particularly enjoyed the commentary on things like stamp collectors. And
yeah, it felt so like geeky and niche and weird that anybody would write about it that I found it really charming.
Yeah, Going Postal is phenomenal. I think personally, Going Postal is even a little bit stronger when you're familiar with the characters of the Ankh-Morpork Pork City Watch. Because your main character in Going Postal is like, guards and cops, and they're always the same. They're always trying to bring a guy like me down. And then Samuel Vimes like kicks the door open and is like, "It's me." And you're like, "Oh, right. That's the City Watch at Ankh-Morpork."
Yeah, I'm very excited. There's in my LARP, there's like a unit, like a group of LARPers. Well, there's lots of them, and one of them is the guard, and it's modeled after like guards or whatever. And to join, you get your own copy, and you have to read it in order to be a part of their like little unit.
That's fantastic.
I think when you join, you have to like swear in using like the guards. I haven't read guards, so I don't know, but I think there's like you have to like quote something or
I think there's an oath that Carrot takes fairly early in the book. Oh, good night, Brecken. Thank you for joining. So I'm super excited to get into Guards because it's been years since I first read it, and I haven't read it since. Tree loves the idea of LARPing the guards from Ankh-Morpork. So I'm super excited to get back into it. I think it's probably going to be a pretty quick read. But something that we realized is that if we only gave people 2 weeks to read this book after having done the 2-week delay, we were doing everybody, ourselves included, kind of a disservice. So Sharon, I remember you and I were looking at the calendar and trying to figure out how that was going to work. And what we ultimately came up with was that we're going to do the 3rd week in December. Is that right?
Yeah, the 15th, I think.
Yes, the 15th. Yeah. 15th of December. And then in January, I can't recall.
I don't think we picked the date for January yet because we hadn't picked a book yet either, but I think we had talked about maybe seeing if we wanted to do something shorter.
Yes.
Since that'll be like right over the holidays, holiday madness. But I don't think we have a date on the calendar yet for January Book Club.
Yeah. We definitely don't have anything on the calendar just yet. It does look like the as of right now, there's the 12th and the 25th that would be options. So we'll figure that out and then we'll get back to folks. But I do want to jump into short stories, novellas, and things of the like that people would like to suggest for us to vote on for our December into January book, since we'll be reading Guards until the did we oh my gosh, I'm so memory brain, the 15th. So I right. Tree is saying so we're doing guards on December 15th and nothing on the 1st. We definitely aren't doing anything on the 1st, if only because it might be tricky to get everybody together. That is also a Friday.
I'm gonna be so hungover. No way.
Oh, we're talking about December 1st.
Oh.
No,
I
so
thought you were talking about January. I was like, no.
I also thought we were talking about January, and then I looked at the calendar and I was like, oh, I see what Trey is talking about now. No, we're gonna do guards on the 15th. We're talking about perhaps doing a Dungeons and Doodles on December 1st, since we don't currently have anything else scheduled on that day. But we need to make sure that that works with Liz's schedule as well. So that's a little bit up in the air still. Await confirmation. We will gladly give it at the point that we have it. But what are some ideas for short stories, novellas, and things like that we have? Sharon, what you got for me?
I don't got nothing, but I know what one of Lauren's recommendations is gonna be, so I'm gonna throw my weight behind that one because she lent it to me, so I already got it.
Yeah, I was looking for it before this, and I was like, oh, I think I lent that to Sharon.
She did. It's on my shelf of books from Lauren, which has its own special little section in my new shelf.
Perks of being friends with me. Anyone who's interested, I'll lend you books.
That's fantastic.
So here, I'll just I'll hold it up if you want to talk about it.
Sure. So this is To Be Taught If Fortunate by Becky Chambers. We just read a book by Becky Chambers, I realize, but this one is really good and quite different. It's about a team of scientists that get sent to look for life on other planets, and stuff happens. It's good. It's really genuine, all about like the love of science and exploration, and it's got like some deep things to say. I think it's a really good novella. I think it was nominated for the Hugo.
That's fantastic.
For best novella for 2020.
Something I recall being recommended in chat was that I think it was Glocken who had said, hey, wasn't How to Lose the Time War recommended at one point? Isn't that a novella?
Yes.
And I was like, perhaps it's time for it to come back up into the running again.
Yes. This Is How You Lose the Time War is really, really good. It is at its heart a love story. It's about two rival agents in a time war that fall in love. And so they're like it takes place all through like space and time, and they're kind of like circling each other, and you get lots of like letters, and it's very weird and very good.
I want to read all of them. Dang it.
The quote on the back is, "Holy shit, this was good," by V.E. Schwab, who's like a really good fantasy author.
I like that. I like that. Who's the author on This Is How You Lose the Time War?
It's there's two. There's Amal El Motar and Max Gladstone.
Okay. All right. I was kind of short on concepts for novellas and the like. So I was like, what is something that is a shorter story that I am aware of that might be interesting to read, something I haven't read before? Um, and I was thinking, I've never read A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens.
I don't
So
think I have either.
I was like, I've seen play adaptations, I've seen multiple film adaptations. Perhaps I should read the book at some point. So I thought I would drop that in as an option. Though I will say, if we're looking for something a little bit light and fluffier, my understanding is that is not it.
Gonna be like, ooh, Dickensian nonsense. Woo.
I
Dickens,
have a light and fluffy one if you want it.
I'd be down for a light and fluffy. Tree has recommended that after we brought up novellas, they ordered the complete collection of Ursula Le Guin, and
Oh,
so any of hers are great. And I would like you to pick a title, Tree, because I can't be like, let's read the entire library of Ursula Le Guin. It's gonna be too much for people.
you know
Um,
what? It's not a novella, but what Ursula K. Le Guin book I've been meaning to read is Left Hand of Darkness. Haven't read that one yet, but if we do a classic sci-fi, that might be what I recommend.
I think
I
classic
see what
sci-fi should absolutely be our January. Like when we come to the table in January, we should come to the table being, or when we come to the table in December, we should come to the table with like some classic sci-fi slash fantasy, um, and kind of duke it out a little bit because there's some old classic stuff that I think would be really cool to get into, like Jules Verne, Ursula Le Guin. Yeah. Um, Tree says if you're going to read Dickens, that is the place to start. And that's what I've heard, and I've never read it. Although I have read Oliver Twist. I read that as a teenager in high school years, and at the time it was a bit of a slog. But I think that's in part because I didn't pick up a lot of the like more key messages that were in that. Um, so let's see. How many titles do we have? We have 3 titles so far. Tree is going to suggest something, I presume, from the Ursula Le Guin catalog. And then, uh, do we have anything else from anyone else that they would like to add to the list? Since we only have 3, we can do as many as 6.
I have 2 in mind, but I'll let the chat have first dibs.
Okay, that's fair. Um, I am intrigued because I know a lot of us picked up our Guards copies way earlier than I did. So I'm intrigued if anyone has started reading yet and if they have any thoughts as well, in addition to book recommendations in chat. Nobody on the call has picked up yet. Tree is going to go look at 13 novellas and see what looks tasty.
Tasty, I love it.
13's a good number.
So for the other 2 novellas I have, one's a sci-fi and one's a fantasy. Which one would you prefer to hear about?
Give me the fantasy one first.
Okay. This one, Every Heart a Doorway. It's a novella series.
Ooh.
And so I learned the term portal fantasy when I was reviewing this book trying to describe it, and somebody was like, oh yeah, that's the name for that. And it's all about the trope of like getting sucked into another world. So like your Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, your Alice in Wonderland, like all of these classic stories about children getting sucked into other worlds. This takes place at a boarding school for all of those kids that get spat back out, and how those journeys in other worlds shape them, and how they have to cope with like living in the real world again.
Oh, interesting.
And there's a murder at this school, and they have to figure out who did it and why.
I feel like...
And it's very queer, and it won some awards, and it's fun.
It's also by Shannon McGuire. She wrote that cryptid series that I was talking about at a way long ago book club, like the very first book club, and I was very excited about all the cryptids.
Yeah, she also wrote another one that I read this year. I read 2 in this novella series, and they've both been fantastic.
I'm about it. The suggestion that Tree came back with was The Stupidest Angel, a heartwarming tale of Christmas terror.
Oh, that sounds fun.
That does sound fun. So I'm going to add that to the list. And maybe what we'll do is kick it to book club Discord for our last one. We only need one more. Because that way, like, you know, the folks who had to dip out a little early will also have a fair chance to throw something into the pot. Christmas terror. Yeah, so I will get the poll up. I am sometimes late on it, and for that I apologize. But in this case, I'll get the poll up by Friday so that we can do our voting this weekend. Because if we don't do our voting this weekend, I don't know that it'll get done next weekend. What with it being Thanksgiving and Black Friday and then the weekend following. And I'm sure people are going to be doing like a lot of video calls with family and things like that. Which speaking of which, as people who are voices a little bit in the community, please don't ignore COVID so that you can do family get together stuff. Like be safe and be careful and protect yourself and your loved ones. And just, you know,
make the safest choice you can.
Right. Be as safe and cautious as you can possibly be, because the last thing any of us wants to hear about is tragedy striking because of family get-togethers over Thanksgiving or Christmas or anything like that, because this virus is very real and it's very dangerous, and it's hard to know when you are at risk or putting others at risk.
Mm-hmm.
I know it's a little darker than we tend to get near the end of book club, but with it being next week, we felt it was really important to at least, you know, mention it and plea with everyone.
Oh, definitely.
Let's see. It's 8:40. You guys want to jump into plugs and call it a night? Mm-hmm. Okay. Sharon, you want to kick us off?
Why don't you kick us off? My brain has already kicked off. It's gone.
The brain is good for the extra point. Field goal successful. Lauren, you kick us off, and then I'll wrap us up.
Sure. So I'm Lauren. I love reading mostly sci-fi, fantasy, and romance. I've been reading a lot of romance lately. If you want to get into romance, like, talk to me. I'll recommend like a romance novel that'll make you feel happy in all of this crap. So yeah, anyway, read fantasy, sci-fi, and romance, and I review it and talk about it on my Instagram at Feminist Reading List. And it's been really fun to do book club with you guys.
And thank you, as always, for joining us, because it is a joy to have you on book club. And I don't think it would be the same if we didn't have all the voices that we have. Um,
Thanks.
uh, if you are on the Discord, Lauren is on there as well as at Special Cupcake.
Yep.
So that is a good place if you want to ping her in book club chat and be like, "Hey, I heard you could, I heard you could get me some of them romance novel recommendations. Got to get my fix." Um, I'm Josh. Sharon and I are one half of the heads of Goblins and Growlers. Um, we're actually really really excited because we just put in an order today. We have an adventure book coming out that is it's a collaborative effort, but the core of all of the adventures are all Sharon's idea. And you did like 80% of the art as well, right?
I maybe did like 30% of the art.
Okay.
Yeah. I didn't do all of it. I only did a few of them. A lot of the art was done by me and Lauren's mutual friend Nicole Fink, who is an illustrator, and she does really cool stuff.
I'm super excited to have us publishing an adventure book. That adventure book is going to be available at our very own local Alpha Comics and Games, um, and will be on shelves here in the immediate future. We will make an announcement about that probably in the Goblins and Growlers channel as soon as that is a reality. But we put in the order today, so soon, very soon. Um, we have a Patreon. If you like the stuff that we do, whether that's, our podcast Quid Pro Roll or the adventures that we produce or, the goofy shenanigans that we sometimes get ourselves into, such as Mad Lib games, then you should definitely check it out. It's patreon.com/goblins growlers. You can not only support us, but in supporting us, you can also get access to a lot of bonus content, special adventures that we write just for the Patreon, things like that. So that would be super awesome of anyone. We've got our Extra Life campaign is still ongoing. We're raising money for the VCU Children's Hospital. We're $140 from our final stretch goal. We've got a few things that are coming down the pipe. We managed to raise in 14 hours just over $1,000, which is crazy awesome. If we can get that last 140, then we're going to do, we already have pledged to do a game of Phasmophobia, where 4 of us sit down and do silly voices and act out characters while we're trying to investigate ghosts. But if we hit that extra $140 to hit the $1,250 stretch goal, we'll do 3 games instead of 1, which I'm excited about. And Tess Inverlock and Scott Groove is for Life have both already said, "Hey, I totally want to play Phasmophobia, so please let me know if and when that becomes a thing," which we 100% will, because they're both great. I think that's everything I've got to talk about. So thank you so much, Lauren and Sharon, for joining me. As always, it is lovely talking books, even when we fundamentally disagree on something like the meta-ness of a book. And thank you, everyone who tuned in and watched along with us and became part of the conversation. And I would love to see more thoughts and opinions in the book club channel on our Discord, link for which is in the top left of the screen. And, everybody have a great night. Be safe over the holidays. Do video calls and things like that. And we will see you all next month, where we'll be discussing Guards. Good night, y'all. Button.